The storm that rattled the windows of the Whitmore mansion wasn't nearly as fierce as the one raging inside 7-year-old Emma's heart. From her bedroom window on the 3rd floor, she watched another figure hurry down the long driveway, pulling a suitcase behind them in the rain. That made number 17. 17 maids, nannies, and housekeepers who had come through those grand front doors with smiles and promises, only to leave with tears or angry words. Emma pressed her small hand against the cold glass and counted on her fingers again, just to be sure. Mrs. Rodriguez lasted 3 days. Miss Patricia made it almost a week. The one with the red hair whose name Emma never learned didn't even make it through lunch on her first day. Behind her, Emma heard her father's heavy footsteps on the marble floor of the hallway. She didn't turn around. She knew what was coming. The same speech he always gave. The same promises that the next one would be better, would understand, would stay. But Emma knew better. She had learned that adults lied, even when they didn't mean to. They promised things they couldn't deliver. Just like her mother had promised she would come back from that business trip 2 years ago. Just like the doctors had promised they would make Mummy better when the plane crashed and they found her broken but still breathing. Just like everyone promised that time would make the pain go away. Daniel Whitmore stood in his daughter's doorway, his expensive suit wrinkled from another long day at the office, his face drawn with exhaustion that went deeper than any business deal could cause. He was 38 years old, the founder of one of the most successful tech companies in Silicon Valley. A man who could solve any problem with enough money, resources, and determination. But he couldn't solve his daughter. He couldn't fix the rage that burned behind her sweet brown eyes. He couldn't heal the wounds that made her lash out at anyone who tried to get close. He couldn't bring back the only person Emma wanted. He said softly, using the nickname her mother had given her. Emma's shoulders stiffened, but she didn't turn around. Mrs. Chen had a family emergency. He lied. The truth was that Emma had locked her in the pantry for 2 hours and thrown flour at her when she finally got out. She had to leave. Emma's reflection in the window showed no emotion. "They all leave," she said in a voice too hollow for a 7-year-old. "Everyone leaves." Daniel's heart cracked a little more, adding to the countless fractures that had formed since Sarah's death. He walked into the room and sat on Emma's bed. The pink comforter that Sarah had picked out still pristine because Emma refused to sleep under it. She slept on top, wrapped in an old blanket of her mother's that still carried the faintest hint of her perfume. The next morning brought no relief. Daniel had already called the agency, and they were sending someone new, our absolute best. The woman on the phone had assured him, though her voice carried a note of desperation. The Whitmore house had become legendary among domestic workers in the city. Good pay, beautiful home, but impossible child. Some even called it cursed. Daniel didn't believe in curses, but he was beginning to wonder if his daughter's pain had become something darker, something that pushed away anyone who tried to enter their broken little world. He heard the doorbell at exactly 9 o'clock. Punctual, at least. He opened the door to find a woman who looked nothing like what he expected. She was perhaps 60 years old, with silver hair pulled back in a simple bun and eyes the color of autumn leaves. She wore a plain gray dress and sensible shoes, and she carried only a small bag. But there was something about her presence, something calm and unshakable, like an ancient tree that had weathered countless storms. "Mr. Whitmore," she said, her voice carrying a slight accent he couldn't place. "I am Margaret Holloway. The agency sent me." Daniel studied her for a moment. This woman who looked more like a grandmother than a professional housekeeper. "Did they warn you?" he asked bluntly. "About Emma?" Margaret's eyes crinkled slightly at the corners. "They told me a little girl lives here who misses her mother very much. That's all I need to know." Emma watched from the top of the stairs as her father led the new woman through the house. She had become an expert at observing, at cataloging the weaknesses of each new person who entered their domain. Mrs. Rodriguez had been afraid of spiders, so Emma had collected them in jars. Miss Patricia couldn't stand loud noises, so Emma had screamed until her throat was raw. This new one, this Margaret, walked differently than the others. She didn't hurry to keep up with Daniel's long strides. She didn't clutch her bag nervously, or look around with wide eyes at the expensive furniture and art. She moved like she belonged there, like she had always been there. When she spotted Emma at the top of the stairs, she didn't smile the fake, too bright smile that adults always gave to children they were afraid of. She simply nodded, a small acknowledgement of Emma's presence, and continued following Daniel. Emma found this disturbing. The woman hadn't tried to win her over, hadn't called her sweetie or honey, or any of those empty words adults used. She had just ... seen her. For the first time in 2 years, Emma felt uncertain about her battle plan. She retreated to her room to think, to plot, to prepare for war. But when she came down for lunch, expecting to find Margaret in the kitchen making something Emma could refuse to eat, she found the woman sitting quietly in the sunroom, reading a book. The kitchen table was set with a simple sandwich, cut into triangles the way her mother used to make them, and a glass of apple juice. No note telling her to eat, no hovering to make sure she finished. Just food, waiting. Emma ate the sandwich, not because she was giving in, but because she was hungry and confused. This was not how it was supposed to go. After lunch, she found Margaret in the library, dusting the shelves with careful, methodical movements. Emma stood in the doorway, waiting to be acknowledged, waiting for the woman to try to engage her in some fake activity or conversation, but Margaret just continued dusting, humming softly to herself. It was an old song, something Emma almost recognized, something that stirred a memory she couldn't quite catch. "My mother is dead," Emma announced suddenly, her voice sharp and challenging. She had learned that this statement usually made adults uncomfortable, made them stutter and apologize, and try to comfort her with empty words. Margaret paused in her dusting and turned to look at Emma. "Yes," she said simply, "she is." Then she turned back to the shelves and continued her work. Emma stood there, mouth slightly open, completely thrown off balance. "Don't you want to talk about it?" she demanded. "Don't you want to tell me she's in a better place, or that she's watching over me, or some other lie?" Margaret set down her dusting cloth and turned fully to face the child. "Would that help you?" she asked. "Would it bring her back?" Emma's hands clenched into fists. "No." "Then why would I waste your time with it?" Margaret picked up her cloth again. "Your mother is dead. You are angry. These are facts. They don't need pretty words around them." That night, Emma lay on top of her pink comforter, wrapped in her mother's blanket, and thought about Margaret Holloway. The woman was different, that much was certain. She didn't try to mother Emma, didn't try to be her friend, didn't try to fix her. She just existed in the space, calm and steady, like a lighthouse in a storm. Emma had prepared for battle, but Margaret wasn't fighting. It was unsettling. The next morning, Emma came downstairs with her arsenal ready. She had filled a bucket with mud from the garden, planning to track it all through the house. But when she reached the kitchen, she found Margaret sitting at the table with 2 cups of hot chocolate and a chessboard. "I thought you might know how to play," Margaret said without looking up. "Your father mentioned you're very smart." Emma stood frozen, the bucket of mud hidden behind her back. "I don't want to play chess," she said. "All right," Margaret replied, taking a sip of her hot chocolate. "I'll practice by myself then." She began setting up the pieces, her movements careful and deliberate. Emma watched, the mud bucket growing heavy in her hands. Her mother had taught her chess. They used to play every Sunday morning while her father made pancakes. The memory hit her like a physical blow, and she dropped the bucket. Mud splattered across the clean floor, dark and ugly against the white tiles. Margaret looked at the mess, then at Emma, then back at the chessboard. "Black or white?" she asked, as if nothing had happened. Emma's defenses crumbled slightly. She found herself moving forward, leaving muddy footprints with each step, and sitting down across from Margaret. "Black," she whispered. They played in silence, the only sounds the slide of pieces across the board and the tick of the grandfather clock in the hallway. Margaret was good, better than Emma expected, but not so good that the game felt hopeless. When Emma captured Margaret's queen with a move the older woman clearly hadn't seen coming, Margaret's eyes lit up with genuine surprise and something that looked like pride. "Sarah taught you well," Margaret said quietly. Emma's hand froze over the captured queen. "How do you know my mother's name?" Margaret's weathered hands folded in her lap. "I knew your mother," she said simply. "Many years ago, before you were born, before she even met your father. We worked at the same hospital. She was a young doctor, so full of life and determination. I was a cleaner on the night shift." Emma's world tilted. "You knew her?" The words came out as barely a whisper. Margaret nodded. "She was kind to everyone." "Your mother?" "She would bring coffee for the cleaning staff, remember our names, ask about our families. When I saw the advertisement for this position, when I learned it was Sarah Chen Whitmore's daughter who needed care, I knew I had to come." Emma's eyes filled with tears she had been holding back for 2 years. "She never mentioned you." "There would be no reason to," Margaret said gently. "I was just one of many people whose lives she touched with her kindness. But I remembered her. And when I heard about the accident, about you, I thought perhaps I could repay some of that kindness." The tears spilled over, running down Emma's cheeks in hot streams. "Everyone says they want to help, but they all leave. They can't handle me. I'm too difficult, too angry, too broken." Margaret reached across the chessboard and took Emma's small hand in her weathered one. "Child, you are not broken. You are grieving. There is a difference. Broken things can't be fixed. Grief is just love, with nowhere to go. And love, real love, never truly leaves us." Emma sobbed then, great heaving sobs that shook her entire body. Margaret didn't try to stop her, didn't try to comfort her with empty platitudes. She simply held her hand and let her cry, let her release 2 years of pain and rage and loneliness. When the sobs finally subsided, Emma looked up with swollen eyes. "Tell me about her," she whispered. "Tell me about my mom when she was young." And Margaret did. She told stories of Sarah's late-night study sessions in the break room, of her terrible jokes that made everyone groan, of her determination to save every patient, even when the odds were impossible. She painted a picture of Sarah as a real person, not just a perfect mother, frozen in memory, but a woman who had been young and uncertain and brave. Daniel found them there 3 hours later when he came home early from work, worried about how Emma was handling yet another new caregiver. He stopped in the doorway of the kitchen, struck silent by the sight before him. Emma was laughing, actually laughing, as Margaret told a story about Sarah trying to convince the entire night shift to do aerobics during their break. The chat between them had been abandoned, and Emma was eating soup, something she hadn't done willingly in months. Margaret looked up and saw him, giving a small nod, but Emma didn't notice his presence. She was too absorbed in the story, too hungry for these pieces of her mother she had never known. Daniel backed away quietly, not wanting to disturb the miracle happening in his kitchen. That night, for the first time since Sarah's death, Emma asked to be tucked in, not by her father, but by Margaret. The older woman sat on the edge of the bed, smoothing the pink comforter that Emma had finally agreed to get under. "Margaret," Emma said quietly, "will you stay? Not just tomorrow, but for a long time." Margaret was quiet for a moment, considering. "I'm an old woman, Emma. I can't promise forever. No one can. But I can promise that as long as I'm able, I'll be here. And when I can't be here anymore, the love and memories we share will stay with you. Just like your mother's love stays with you now." Emma nodded, understanding in a way that only a child who has lost everything can understand. "Will you tell me more stories about her tomorrow?" "Every day, if you'd like," Margaret replied. "And perhaps you can tell me stories too, about the Mother I didn't get to see. The one who sang you lullabies and made you pancakes and loved you more than all the stars in the sky. Emma smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes for the first time in 2 years. She did love me more than all the stars. She told me every night. Then she still does, Margaret said firmly. Love like that doesn't die. It just changes form. As Margaret turned to leave, Emma called out softly, Margaret, I'm sorry about the mud. Margaret paused at the door, a small smile playing at her lips. What mud, child? I didn't see any mud. Emma giggled, the sound filling the room like music. Daniel, listening from the hallway, felt his own eyes fill with tears. No maid had lasted with his millionaire's little daughter. It was true. 17 had come and gone, unable to weather the storm of Emma's grief. But Margaret Holloway hadn't come as a maid. She had come as a bridge between the living and the dead, between memory and healing, between a broken past and a possible future. Over the weeks that followed, the Whitmore mansion transformed, not in any visible way, but in the way it felt. Laughter returned to its halls. The kitchen smelled of baking cookies and hot chocolate. Emma's artwork, dark scribbles of loss and anger, slowly gave way to pictures of 3 figures holding hands. One with silver hair, one tall in a suit, and one small, with her mother's eyes. Margaret taught Emma to cook Sarah's favorite recipes, using measuring cups Sarah had once touched. Following handwritten recipe cards in Sarah's careful script, Daniel joined them on weekends, learning that his wife had been terrible at making rice, but excellent at soup. That she had once burned water trying to make tea, that she had sung off-key while cooking, but with such joy that no one minded. They created new traditions while honoring old ones. Sunday morning chess became a regular event, with Daniel learning to play so they could have tournaments. Margaret introduced them to her own family traditions, teaching Emma to knit badly, but with enthusiasm, showing Daniel how to make proper British tea, filling their evenings with stories of her own childhood in a small English village. Emma still had bad days, days when the grief hit her like a wave, and she couldn't breathe. But now, instead of locking people out, she would find Margaret and simply sit beside her, sometimes crying, sometimes silent, always understood. Margaret never tried to fix these moments, never tried to hurry them along. She simply existed beside Emma, a steady presence in the storm. One day, almost 6 months after Margaret's arrival, Emma came home from school with a project. She was supposed to write about her hero. Daniel expected her to write about her mother, or maybe about a famous person she had learned about in class. But when Emma read her essay aloud at dinner, it was about Margaret. My hero doesn't wear a cape or fly or save the world, Emma read, her voice clear and strong. My hero is Margaret Holloway. She knew my mom before I was born, and she came to take care of me when I was too sad and too angry for anyone else to love. She didn't try to replace my mom or make me forget her. Instead, she helped me remember her in new ways. She showed me that love doesn't end when someone dies, it just changes shape. She taught me that being angry is okay, but staying angry forever means you miss out on new happiness. Margaret isn't trying to be my mom, and that's what makes her special. She's just Margaret, and that's exactly what I needed. Margaret's eyes glistened as Emma finished reading. Daniel reached across the table and took both their hands, his daughter's small one and Margaret's weathered one, creating a circle of connection. No maid lasted with the millionaire's little daughter, Emma said with a small smile, until a new maid did the impossible. But Margaret didn't do something impossible. She did something simple. She stayed, she remembered, and she loved me anyway. As the seasons changed and a year passed, the Whitmore house became known for something different. Not as the house where the impossible child lived, but as the house where healing happened. Daniel had started a foundation in Sarah's name, focusing on grief counseling for children. Margaret helped coordinate support groups that met in their large living room, sharing her wisdom with other families navigating loss. Emma became a peer counselor, using her own journey to help other children understand that anger and sadness were normal, that healing wasn't linear, that love persisted beyond death. She would tell them about Margaret, about the maid who lasted not because she was stronger or more patient than the others, but because she understood that sometimes the best way to help someone heal is not to try to fix them, but to simply witness their pain and stand steady beside them. On the second anniversary of Sarah's death, they held a celebration of life in the garden. Friends, family, and the 17 former housekeepers who had tried and failed were all invited. Each one came, curious to see what had changed. They found Emma radiant, not without sadness, but with a peace that comes from processing grief rather than running from it. They found Daniel engaged and present, no longer hiding behind work. And they found Margaret, the unlikely hero, who had done the impossible, not through force or strategy, but through patient, understanding love. As the sun set over the garden party, Emma stood between her father and Margaret, looking at a photo of her mother that they had placed on a memorial table, surrounded by Sarah's favorite flowers. "She would be proud of you," Margaret said softly. Emma nodded. "She would be grateful to you," she replied, "for doing what she couldn't do anymore, for loving me through the hardest part." Margaret squeezed her shoulder gently. "That's what family does, child, and families come in all shapes, formed in all ways. Some are born, some are chosen, and some, like ours, are forged in the fire of loss and found in the ashes of grief." Daniel wrapped his arms around both of them, his daughter, and the woman who had saved them both. "No maid lasted with the millionaire's little daughter," he said, repeating the phrase that had become something of a family joke until Margaret Holloway did the impossible. She showed us that the impossible was actually quite simple. She showed us how to live again. The story of the Whitmore family spread throughout the city and beyond, not as gossip about the difficult child and the miracle worker, but as a testament to the power of patient love and the importance of allowing grief its place in healing. Margaret received offers from other families, other broken situations that needed her particular brand of wisdom, but she stayed with the Whitmores, understanding that some connections transcend employment, that some families are built not on blood, but on the choice to show up, day after day, especially when it's hard. Emma grew into a remarkable young woman, carrying both her mother's medical aspirations and Margaret's gift for seeing pain and meeting it with steady love. She would often tell people the story of the 17 maids who couldn't last, and the one who did the impossible. But she would always clarify that Margaret's impossible act wasn't taming a wild child or fixing a broken family. It was something far more profound. She had shown them that grief and joy could coexist, that memory and present moment could dance together, that a family could be rebuilt, not in the same shape as before, but in a new form that honored both. What was lost and what was found. Years later, when Margaret was older and Emma was in medical school, following in her mother's footsteps, they would still have Sunday morning chess games. Daniel would make pancakes, burning them slightly just like Sarah used to do, on purpose to make Emma laugh, and Margaret would tell stories, weaving together past and present, memory and hope, loss and love, into a tapestry that held them all together. The impossible had indeed been done, not through force or manipulation or even patience alone, but through the simple recognition that sometimes the best way to heal a broken heart is not to try to fix it, but to sit beside it, hold its hand, and remind it that love never truly leaves us. It just transforms, like energy, like matter, like the eternal connection between a mother and daughter that even death couldn't sever. Margaret had understood this from the beginning, had known that Emma didn't need another mother, didn't need to be fixed, or corrected, or trained. She needed someone to see her pain, acknowledge its validity, and love her not despite it, but with it, through it, because of it. And in doing so, Margaret had done what 17 others couldn't do. She had lasted. She had stayed. she had loved, and in the end, that was the only impossible thing that had ever really mattered. No maid lasted with the millionaire's little daughter, until a new maid did the impossible. But the truth was, Margaret Holloway hadn't done the impossible at all. She had simply done what love does. She had shown up, stayed present, and refused to let a child's grief convince her she was unlovable. And in that simple, revolutionary act, she had saved them all.